The autumn sun had barely crept over the horizon when Roy Garrett flipped the sign on Mildred's Cafe from closed to open. 6 in the morning. Right on schedule. The same schedule he'd maintained for 23 years, ever since Martha passed and left him the place. The cafe's worn interior, with its faded photos of local fishing tournaments and dusty Miller Lite signs, hadn't changed much since the Clinton administration, and neither had the menu. Roy fired up the ancient grill, its surface darkened by decades of sizzling bacon and hash browns. The familiar scrape of his spatula against metal filled the quiet morning air as he laid down the first strips of bacon for the day. Outside, Mildridge, Indiana was just starting to wake up. Farmers heading to their fields, the occasional truck rumbling past toward the interstate. Tom and Frank, a pair of retired postal workers who functioned as the town's unofficial morning news service, pushed through the door at precisely 6:15 a.m. "Morning, Roy," Tom called, settling onto his usual stool at the counter. "Gonna be a cold one today?" Frank nodded in agreement as he eased his arthritic frame onto the adjacent seat. "Supposed to drop below 40 tonight. First frost coming." Roy grunted acknowledgement as he poured their coffee. Black for Tom, 2 sugars for Frank, the same order they'd had since the day he took over the cafe. "You boys want the usual?" Roy asked, already knowing the answer. "Does a bear shit in the woods?" Frank replied with a wink. Roy rolled his eyes and turned back to the grill. 2 breakfast specials coming up, 3 eggs over easy, bacon crisp but not burnt, hash browns golden, toast buttered edge to edge. He could make these orders blindfolded. The front door chimed again, and Sheriff Dave Hollister strode in, his uniform pressed and badge gleaming. Dave and Roy had been friends since high school, though their relationship had occasionally veered into rivalry territory, especially when it came to fishing the bass tournaments at Lake Bennett. "Morning, gentlemen," Dave said, nodding to Tom and Frank before turning to Roy. "Got time to whip up a breakfast sandwich? I'm on patrol early today." "You're lucky I'm feeling generous," Roy said, cracking another egg onto the grill. He glanced at the wall clock. 6:30 a.m. Everything running like clockwork in Mildridge, just as it should. Until 6:45 a.m., when Clockwork Mildridge came to a screeching halt. The first sign was a high-pitched whine that made Roy's fillings ache. The lights in the cafe flickered, dimmed, and then surged back to full brightness. Coffee cups rattled on their saucers. "What in tarnation?" Frank muttered, peering out the window. Outside, a swirling dust cloud had formed in the empty lot next to the cafe, spiraling upward like a miniature tornado. Within the cloud, something metallic gleamed and pulsed with blue-green light. "Roy, you might want to see this," Sheriff Hollister said, his hand instinctively moving to rest on his holstered pistol. Roy wiped his hands on his apron and joined the others at the window. The dust was settling now, revealing what could only be described as a spacecraft, though it looked nothing like the flying saucers in old sci-fi movies. This craft resembled an elaborate chandelier, with delicate crystalline arms extending from a central sphere. The entire structure hovered about 3 feet above the ground, gently bobbing up and down. "Should I call this in?" Dave asked, his voice unusually tight. Before anyone could answer, a panel slid open in the sphere's underside, and a figure emerged, or rather, descended, on what appeared to be a beam of light. The being stood upright on 2 legs, but any resemblance to humanity ended there. It wore what appeared to be a sealed environmental suit, complete with a bulbous helmet that obscured its features. The suit itself was covered in blinking lights, dials, and what might have been monitoring equipment. A small box at the being's throat emitted a soft blue glow. "Sheriff," Roy said quietly, "you got the department's camera in your car?" Dave nodded, never taking his eyes off the visitor. "I'll get it. Don't do anything stupid." "Roy." "When have I ever done anything stupid?" Roy asked. But Dave was already halfway to the door. The alien, for what else could it be, was approaching the cafe now. Its gait, oddly formal, almost bureaucratic, Each step seemed measured, as if it were counting the distance. "I'm going out there," Roy announced. "Like hell you are," Frank protested. "That's an alien." "This is my property," Roy said, untying his apron. "And if that thing wants breakfast, it better be prepared to pay like everybody else." With that, Roy pushed through the cafe door and stepped into the crisp Indiana morning. The alien stopped about 10 feet away, the lights on its suit blinking more rapidly. "Hello," Roy called, trying to keep his voice steady. "Can I help you?" The blue light at the alien's throat pulsed, and a mechanical voice emerged. "Greetings, Earth inhabitant. I am Inspector Pilt of the Galactic Environmental Protection Bureau. I am here under Directive 77B. Scan and assess atmospheric composition of developing worlds." Roy blinked. Of all the things he had imagined an alien might say upon reaching Earth, this bureaucratic introduction hadn't been one of them. "I'm Roy Garrett. I own this cafe." He gestured behind him. "Would you, like to come in? We serve breakfast." The alien, Inspector Pilt, tilted its helmeted head. "My analysis of your atmospheric composition is complete. I regret to inform you that your planet's air has been categorized as catastrophically toxic under GEPB standards." Roy frowned. "Toxic? We breathe this air just fine." "Nevertheless," Pilt continued, "Earth's atmosphere contains numerous corrosive elements, including high concentrations of nitrogen and oxygen. These elements are classified as environment-degrading substances." Behind Roy, the cafe door opened, and Sheriff Hollister emerged, camera in hand. "Is there a problem here, Roy?" Dave asked, eyeing the alien warily. "This is Inspector Pilt from some Galactic Environment Office," Roy explained. "Says our air is toxic." "Catastrophically toxic," Pilt corrected. "As per GEPB Regulation 142A. I must inform you that an atmospheric cleansing has been scheduled to commence in 48 Earth hours." "Cleansing?" Roy repeated. "What exactly does that mean?" "The current nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere will be replaced with a standard Type 3 breathable atmosphere, suitable for most advanced life forms," Pilt explained, as casually as if discussing a routine oil change. Roy's mind raced to comprehend what he was hearing. "Replaced? But we need this atmosphere to live." "That is unfortunate," Pilt said, the translation device somehow conveying bureaucratic indifference. "However, GEPB protocols for uninhabited planets are quite clear." "Uninhabited?" Roy's voice rose. "There are billions of people living on Earth." Pilt's suit lights blinked in what might have been surprise. "My scans indicated only minimal biological activity compatible with the toxic atmosphere. If significant intelligent life exists here, that would activate different protocols." By now, a small crowd had gathered outside the cafe. Tom and Frank had joined Roy and Dave and other townspeople, drawn by the unusual craft, were cautiously approaching. "Sheriff," Roy said quietly, "I think we have a situation here." Dave nodded, his face grim. "I'm calling the state police and the governor's office. This is way above my pay grade." He retreated to his patrol car, already reaching for his radio. Roy turned back to Pilt. "Look, Inspector, there's been a misunderstanding. Earth is heavily inhabited by intelligent life. Us, humans. We've built civilizations here for thousands of years." Pilt's helmet swiveled, taking in the gathering crowd. "Fascinating. My atmospheric toxicity models did not predict such extensive adaptation." "Listen," Roy said, a desperate idea forming. "I remember you mentioned regulations. Doesn't your bureau have rules about planets with intelligent life?" Pilt's suit lights flickered in what Roy hoped was consideration. "Section 118.7c does require a full evaluation before any irreversible environmental action can be taken on planets showing signs of intelligent civilization." "Then you need to do that evaluation," Roy pressed. "You can't just replace our atmosphere without checking if it'll kill everyone first." The alien was silent for a long moment, the only sound the soft hum of its suit systems. Finally, it spoke. A 24 Earth-hour observation period can be granted to evaluate survival capabilities. If your species can demonstrate continued existence in what our models classify as a toxic environment, the cleansing may be postponed pending further review. Roy let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Thank you. That's reasonable. I will require a guide to observe your species in various environments, Pilt said. Are you available for this function, Roy Garrett of Mildridge Cafe? Roy looked back at his cafe, at the curious and frightened faces of his neighbors, at the half-cooked breakfast still on the grill. 23 years of the same routine, and now this. Yeah, he said, turning back to Pilt. I guess I am. The next hour passed in a blur of explanations, phone calls, and hastily organized town meetings. Sheriff Hollister had contacted state officials, who in turn had alerted federal authorities. By mid-morning, news vans from Indianapolis were parked along Main Street, and social media was ablaze with shaky videos of Pilt's craft. Roy, meanwhile, had volunteered to be Pilt's personal guide to human life in Mildridge. His first stop, downtown. This is our town center, Roy explained as they walked along the main street. Morning had fully arrived, and with it, the normal bustle of small-town life, though today, that bustle was tinged with the excited whispers and pointed fingers of people watching Roy and his alien companion. Note how everyone is moving about freely in the open air, Roy pointed out. No protective gear needed. Pilt's helmet swiveled from side to side, presumably recording everything. Puzzling. My instruments continue to register atmospheric components that should be corrosive to biological systems. Well, your instruments are wrong, Roy said bluntly. We've been breathing this air for as long as humans have existed. They passed a construction crew working on a storefront renovation, a group of schoolchildren being herded toward the library by their teacher, and farmers unloading produce at the weekly market. All these different humans engage in specialized tasks? Pilt asked. That's how society works, Roy explained. Everyone has their job, keeps the town running. Fascinating adaptation, Pilt muttered, more to himself than to Roy. The readings must be miscalibrated. Oxygen at these levels should be caustic to respiratory systems. As they continued their tour, Roy noticed a familiar figure emerging from a storefront up ahead. Sarah Miller, owner of Sweet Delights Bakery and, though Roy would never admit it aloud, the woman who had occupied his thoughts since high school. She was wiping flour from her hands onto her apron, her auburn hair caught in the morning sunlight. "Roy Garrett!" she called, her eyes widening as she spotted his unusual companion. "I heard the rumors, but I didn't believe them until now." "Sarah," Roy nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "This is Inspector Pilt from the, Galactic Environmental Protection Bureau. He's here to evaluate Earth's atmosphere." Sarah's expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Evaluate it for what?" "Apparently, to decide whether to replace it," Roy said grimly. "Replace our atmosphere?" Sarah's voice rose. That's insane." "Which is why I'm showing the inspector around," Roy explained, trying to convince him that humans actually like our air the way it is. Sarah stepped closer, studying Pilt with undisguised curiosity. "Well, Inspector, I hope Roy's showing you the best of Mildridge. The specimen appears healthy, despite environmental exposure," Pilt noted, his translator making the clinical observation sound almost comical. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Specimen? I'm Sarah Miller, Inspector. I run the bakery here, and I've been breathing this air for 42 years without any problems. The Bureau's models clearly require adjustment," Pilt conceded. "However, regulations demand thorough observation before any revisions to established protocols." "Well then," Sarah said, hands on hips, "you should come to my bakery for lunch. I make the best apple pie in 3 counties. That ought to convince you that life here is worth preserving." Roy shot her a grateful look. Sarah had always been quick-thinking and persuasive, traits that had made her an effective advocate at town council meetings and PTA functions. An excellent suggestion, Pilt agreed. Consumption practices would provide valuable data points. It's a date, then, Sarah said, looking at Roy rather than Pilt. Noon at Sweet Delights. My girls will be there too. They're home from school today. Teacher in service day. As Sarah returned to her bakery, Roy felt a familiar warmth in his chest. He and Sarah had been dancing around each other for years, both single, both busy with their businesses, both carrying old heartaches. Maybe it took an alien-threatening planetary destruction to finally move things forward. The female human shows signs of heightened pheromone production in your presence, Pilt observed casually. Roy nearly tripped over a crack in the sidewalk. She what? My suit's sensors detect chemical signatures consistent with mating interest, Pilt continued, apparently oblivious to Roy's discomfort. Is she your designated reproduction partner? Jesus Christ, Roy muttered, feeling heat rise to his face. No, she's not we're friends, neighbors. We've known each other a long time. Curious, Pilt's helmet tilted. Your cardiovascular rate has increased by 12% during this exchange. Such physiological responses typically indicate— Let's move on, Roy interrupted hastily. Plenty more to see before lunch. By noon, Roy had shown Pilt the elementary school, from a distance, as the principal had firmly declined to allow an alien visitor inside during school hours. The post office and the town hall. Throughout the tour, Roy had emphasized how humans of all ages moved freely in the open air, thriving in what Pilt's instruments insisted was a toxic soup of gases. As promised, they arrived at Sweet Delight's Bakery just as the old clock on the town square struck 12. The bell above the door jingled as they entered, and the warm, sweet smell of baked goods enveloped them. Sarah looked up from behind the counter, where she was arranging a display of cupcakes. Right on time, she called. Girls, our special guests are here. From the back room emerged two young girls, Emma, 10 years old with her mother's auburn hair, and Jenny, 8, with a splash of freckles across her nose. Both stopped short at the sight of Pilt, their eyes widening. Whoa, Emma breathed. A real alien. Are you going to take over the world? Jenny asked, her voice a mixture of fear and excitement. Jenny, Sarah scolded, don't be rude to our guest. The GEPB has no territorial ambitions, Pilt assured them, his mechanical voice startling the girls. Our mission is environmental regulation only. Do you eat food? Emma asked, recovering quickly from her surprise. Mom made special sandwiches for lunch. My species absorbs nutrients through a filtration system, Pilt explained. However, observation of your consumption methods would be valuable data. Sarah ushered them to a table by the window, already set with plates and glasses. I made chicken salad sandwiches, potato chips, and lemonade, she said. And, of course, apple pie for dessert. As Roy, Sarah, and the girls ate, Pilt observed, occasionally asking questions about food preparation, nutritional content, and eating customs. His helmet, Roy noticed, contained various sensors that seemed to be analyzing the food from a distance. Your young appear healthy despite atmospheric exposure, Pilt noted, watching Emma and Jenny devour their lunch. They're more than healthy, Sarah said proudly. Emma's top of her class in science, and Jenny's the fastest runner in her grade. Do you have kids? Jenny asked Pilt. The alien suit lights blinked rapidly. Borlaxians do not reproduce individually. Population management is centrally regulated through genetic optimization protocols. That sounds sad, Emma said, wrinkling her nose. It is efficient, Pilt corrected. Random genetic combination leads to unnecessary variation and potential defects. But that's what makes people special, Sarah argued gently. Everyone's different. That's what makes life interesting. Roy watched as Pilt's helmet turned from Sarah to the girls. Then, back to Sarah. Something in the alien's posture suggested confusion, or perhaps the beginning of understanding. After lunch, Sarah brought out her famous apple pie, its golden crust still warm from the oven. "This is from apples grown right here in Indiana," she explained, cutting generous slices. "The trees breathe our air, drink our water, and produce these fruits. Then I add cinnamon, sugar, and a little secret ingredient passed down from my grandmother." "A complex chemical transformation process," Pilt observed. "We call it baking," Sarah said with a smile. Roy took a bite of pie and closed his eyes in appreciation. "Sarah, you've outdone yourself. This might be your best batch yet." "The ritual appears to provide significant sensory satisfaction," Pilt noted, watching Roy's expression. "That's one way of putting it," Roy chuckled. "We call it delicious." As they finished their pie, Roy checked his watch. "We should probably move on. I thought we'd head out to Lake Bennett this afternoon. Show you a bit of recreation." "Recreation?" Pilt's translator made the word sound foreign. "You know, fun, relaxation, things we do when we're not working," Roy explained. "Purposeless activity," Pilt concluded. "Not purposeless," Roy corrected. "Just differently purposed." Sarah wrapped up extra slices of pie for them to take along. As they prepared to leave, she touched Roy's arm gently. "Be careful out there," she said softly. "And good luck convincing your friend that we're worth saving." "I'll do my best," Roy promised. Emma and Jenny insisted on walking them to the door. "Will you come back later?" Jenny asked Pilt. "I want to show you my rock collection." "If atmospheric cleansing is postponed, return visits may be scheduled," Pilt replied. Emma frowned. "You're not really going to take away our air, are you? We need it to live." For the first time, Pilt seemed to hesitate before answering. "Protocols must be followed. However, exceptions can be made based on sufficient evidence." "Then we'll just have to give you that evidence," Roy said firmly. The drive to Lake Bennett took 20 minutes in Roy's old pickup truck. Pilt sat in the passenger seat, various instruments on his suit beeping and flashing as they traveled. "This motorized conveyance operates on primitive combustion technology," the alien observed. "It's a 2025 Ford F-150, Roy corrected. "Nothing primitive about it. Got almost 250,000 miles on it and still runs fine." "You measure distance in miles?" Pilt asked. "As opposed to what?" "Standardized galactic distance units, of course. 1 GDU equals approximately 1.47 of your kilometers." Roy shook his head. "Well, excuse us for not getting the galactic memo." They arrived at Lake Bennett, a modest body of water surrounded by trees just beginning to show their autumn colors. A wooden dock extended into the water, and Roy's small fishing boat was tied up at the end. "This is where I come fishing," Roy explained, leading Pilt down the dock. "Been coming here since I was a boy." "You extract aquatic life forms for consumption?" Pilt asked. "Sometimes," Roy admitted, "but mostly I just sit here and think. It's peaceful." He untied the boat and gestured for Pilt to join him. The alien stepped carefully into the small craft, causing it to rock alarmingly. "Maintain equilibrium," Roy advised, steadying the boat. "These things can tip over if you're not careful." Once they were settled, Roy started the small outboard motor and guided the boat to the center of the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the clouds and trees like a mirror. "So this is fishing," Roy explained, cutting the motor and reaching for his tackle box. "You put bait on a hook, cast your line into the water, and wait for a fish to bite." "How long does this process take?" Pilt asked. Roy shrugged. "Sometimes minutes, sometimes hours. That's not really the point." "What is the point, then?" Roy considered the question as he baited his hook with a plastic worm. "The point is just being here, enjoying the quiet, thinking about life. You sit inactive for extended periods. For enjoyment?" Pilt's voice somehow conveyed incredulity despite its mechanical tone. "Yep." Roy cast his line with a practiced flick of his wrist. "On Borlax Prime, or whatever your planet is called. Don't you ever just sit and do nothing?" "Negative. Unstructured time is inefficient. Recreation on Borlax Prime is scheduled and optimized for psychological benefit. Roy raised an eyebrow. Scheduled fun? That sounds awful. It is logical, Pilt countered. Resources are allocated appropriately, and activities are designed to maximize benefit. But there's no spontaneity, Roy argued. No chance to just see what happens. They sat in silence for a while. The only sounds the gentle lapping of water against the boat and the occasional call of a bird. Roy could almost forget that his fishing companion was an alien bureaucrat with the power to end all life on Earth. In your observation, Pilt finally said, does this activity improve your functionality? Roy thought about it. Yeah, I suppose it does. Clears my head. Helps me think better when I get back to work. Fascinating. Pilt's suit lights blinked slowly. Our models did not predict psychological benefits from unstructured activity. Your models seem to miss a lot about humans, Roy pointed out. A concerning observation, Pilt admitted. If atmospheric models are similarly flawed. Roy felt a spark of hope. Exactly. Maybe we're not so incompatible with this atmosphere after all. They spent another hour on the lake, during which Roy caught and released 2 modest-sized bass. Pilt recorded the entire process, seeming particularly interested in Roy's decision not to keep the fish. You expend energy to capture the organisms, then return them to their habitat? The alien asked. Sometimes fishing is just about the challenge, Roy explained. The thrill of the catch, not the meal. As the afternoon waned, Roy guided the boat back to shore. I think we should make one more stop before the day is done, he said. Show you how humans socialize in the evening. Your species engages in nocturnal communal behavior? Pilt asked. Roy grinned. You could say that. We're going to the Rusty Nell. The Rusty Nell was Mildredge's oldest bar, a weathered building on the edge of town that had served generations of farmers, factory workers, and anyone else in need of a cold beer and sympathetic ear. By the time Roy and Pilt arrived, the evening crowd was in full swing, country music blaring from ancient speakers while locals shot pool, played darts, or simply nursed their drinks at the scarred wooden bar. A hush fell over the room as they entered, all eyes turning to the alien in the environmental suit. Evening, folks, Roy called, trying to sound casual. This is Inspector Pilt from the Galactic Environmental Protection Bureau. He's just observing how we live. Slowly, conversations resumed, though many patrons continued to steal glances at the unusual visitor. Atmospheric toxins have increased in this location, Pilt noted, his suit lights blinking more rapidly. Multiple pollutants detected. That's just cigarette smoke and spilled beer, Roy explained, leading Pilt to the bar. Mac, 2 beers. Mac, the barrel-chested bartender, who'd been running the Rusty Nell for as long as anyone could remember, eyed Pilt suspiciously. Your friend old enough to drink? He's from another planet, Mac, Roy said dryly. I think he's of age. Mac shrugged and slid 2 bottles across the bar. Your funeral if the feds come asking. Roy took a swig of his beer. This is another form of recreation, he explained to Pilt. People come here after work to relax, socialize, maybe blow off some steam. The acoustic vibrations are intense, Pilt observed, referring to the music. Is this damaging to auditory organs? Only if you're over 40, Roy quipped. As they stood watching the crowd, a large man with a red face and alcohol-heavy breath approached, swaying slightly. You're Roy Garrett, the man slurred, pointing an unsteady finger. Owner of that cafe that poisoned my bowels 3 years ago. Roy sighed. Evening, Hank. I think you've had enough for tonight. Don't tell me when I've had enough, Hank growled, then turned his bleary gaze on Pilt. And what the hell is this? Halloween ain't for months. This is Inspector Pilt, Roy said, trying to keep his voice level. He's a visitor. Visitor, my ass, Hank snorted. That's a man in a stupid costume. He reached out suddenly, grabbing at Pilt's helmet. Let's see who's really in there. Hank, don't, Roy warned, but it was too late. Hank's clumsy fingers caught on one of the external valves of Pilt's suit, and with a wrenching motion, he tore it free. There was a loud hiss as the suit's pressure equalized with the bar's atmosphere. The music scratched to a halt. Every eye in the place fixed on Pilt, whose suit lights were now flashing red in what Roy assumed was an alarm pattern. Environmental seal compromised, Pilt announced, his mechanical voice higher than usual. Emergency protocols initiated. Oh God, Roy breathed, expecting the alien to collapse at any moment, poisoned by Earth's supposedly toxic atmosphere. Instead, Pilt stood motionless for several long seconds. Then, slowly, the alien raised gloved hands to the helmet and, with deliberate care, twisted it counterclockwise. There was another hiss of escaping gas, and the helmet lifted free. The face beneath was not what Roy had expected. Pilt had a roughly humanoid appearance, though his skin was a pale lavender color, and his large, almond-shaped eyes were a solid silver, where a human would have a nose. Pilt had only 2 small breathing slits, and his mouth was a narrow line without visible lips. Pilt inhaled deeply, his breathing slits expanding slightly. Atmospheric composition is... He paused, seeming to search for words. Different than expected. Oxygen levels are high, but not immediately caustic as models predicted. The bar erupted in commotion. Some patrons backed away in fear, others pressed closer in fascination. And Hank, the cause of the whole situation, stumbled backward into a table, upending several drinks. You okay? Roy asked Pilt, genuinely concerned. Preliminary assessment suggests short-term exposure is survivable, Pilt replied. However, long-term effects remain unknown without proper testing. The situation might have stabilized there, had Hank not chosen that moment to make things worse. It is a damn alien, he shouted, lunging forward again. Government's been hiding them all along. Sheriff Hollister, who had entered the bar just moments earlier, moved quickly to intercept Hank, but not before the drunk man collided with a pool player mid-shot. The pool cue went wide, striking another patron, who retaliated with a shove. Within seconds, the classic elements of a bar brawl were in motion: pushing, shoving, wild punches, and overturned furniture. We need to get out of here, Roy shouted to Pilt over the growing chaos. They made their way toward the door, dodging flying glasses and flailing limbs. Sheriff Hollister was trying valiantly to restore order, but the combination of alcohol, excitement, and the presence of an actual alien had created a perfect storm of chaos. Just as they reached the exit, a chair sailed through the air, striking Pilt squarely in the back. The alien stumbled forward, dropping his helmet, which rolled across the floor and disappeared under a table. My atmospheric protection, Pilt cried, his natural voice higher and more melodic than the translator's mechanical tones. No time to find it. Roy grabbed Pilt's arm and pulled him through the door. We'll have to make a run for it. They burst into the cool night air, the sounds of the brawl diminishing as the door swung shut behind them. Roy's truck was parked at the far end of the lot, and he hurried Pilt toward it, the alien taking deep, experimental breaths of Earth's night air. How are you feeling? Roy asked as they reached the truck. Any burning sensations? Difficulty breathing? Pilt's silver eyes blinked slowly. Negative. Respiratory function continues normally. Most unexpected. Let's get you somewhere quieter, Roy suggested. I know a place that's open late. Gary's Diner, also known to locals as Midnight Munch, was Mildredge's only 24-hour eatery. Located on the highway at the edge of town, it catered to truckers, night shift workers, and anyone else in need of coffee and comfort food in the small hours. As Roy guided his truck into the parking lot, he was surprised to see Sarah's car already there. He hadn't called ahead to tell her where they were going after the lake. Inside, they found Sarah and her daughters in a corner booth, Emma and Jenny coloring on paper placemats, while Sarah nursed a cup of coffee. Roy! Sarah looked up in surprise, then gasped as she noticed Pilt's helmetless state. What happened? Bar fight at the Rusty Nell, Roy explained, sliding into the booth beside her. Hank Durbin happened. Of course it was Hank, Sarah sighed. Are you okay? She asked Pilt directly. Functional, Pilt assured her, taking the seat opposite. Though exposure to your atmosphere was not part of the observation protocol. We heard about the alien visitor on the news, Sarah explained. The girls were too excited to sleep, so I thought we'd come here for late-night waffles and maybe catch you on your way back through town. Glad you did, Roy said sincerely. It's been quite a day. You're purple, Jenny exclaimed, staring openly at Pilt. Lavender, Pilt corrected. A common pigmentation on Borlax Prime. Your eyes are so pretty, Emma added. They look like mirrors. Reflective irises evolved for low-light conditions, Pilt explained, seeming more at ease with the children's direct questions than with adult conversation. A waitress approached, did a double-take at Pilt, then gathered her professional composure. What can I get you folks? Coffee for me, Roy said. And a waffle for my friend here. With extra syrup, Sarah suggested. If you're going to try Earth food, might as well go all in. After the waitress left, Pilt turned his silver gaze to Roy. The absence of immediate respiratory distress contradicts all GEPB atmospheric models for Class M planets. Which means, Sarah prompted. The models may be technically correct but practically wrong, Pilt admitted. Earth's atmosphere contains elements classified as toxic under GEPB standards, but adaptation appears possible. More than possible, Roy argued. We thrive in this air, have for thousands of years. The waitress returned with Roy's coffee and Pilt's waffle, the latter drowning in maple syrup as requested. The alien studied the food with obvious curiosity. Traditional consumption requires a utensil, Sarah explained, handing Pilt a fork. Cut a piece and try it. With careful precision, Pilt separated a small portion of waffle, raised it to his narrow mouth, and took a tentative bite. The alien's silver eyes widened dramatically. Sensory input is overwhelming, Pilt declared after swallowing. Complex carbohydrates, processed tree fluid, butter lipids. The combination produces an unexpected neurological response. We call that delicious, Jenny informed him solemnly. Is it sufficient evidence that Earth should not be cleansed? Roy asked bluntly. Pilt seemed to consider this as he took another bite of waffle. My observations today suggest that GEPB protocols may require significant revision. Earth's atmospheric composition, while technically falling outside safety parameters, clearly supports thriving biological diversity. Roy was about to respond when the diner's lights flickered and dimmed. Outside, a deep humming sound grew steadily louder, and the windows began to vibrate. What now? Roy muttered, moving to the window. Descending from the night sky was a craft that made Pilt's chandelier-like vessel look like a toy. This ship was massive, at least the size of a football field, with pulsing lights along its gleaming hull and what appeared to be multiple engine pods. GEPB enforcement vessel, Pilt said, his voice tight. Senior inspectors have arrived. Is that bad? Sarah asked, instinctively drawing her daughters closer. Potentially, Pilt admitted. My preliminary findings have not yet been officially filed. Standard protocols would still classify Earth for atmospheric cleansing. The giant ship came to hover directly over the diner's parking lot, bathing everything in harsh white light. A beam of blue energy lanced down from the ship's underside, and within it materialized three figures in environmental suits, similar to Pilt's, though more elaborate and adorned with various insignia. We need to go out there, Roy decided. Try to explain the situation. I will accompany you, Pilt said, rising from the booth. As primary inspector, my observations must be officially recorded. We're coming too, Sarah declared, gathering her daughters. They need to see that families, children, live here. Together. The unusual group exited the diner, into the brilliant glare of the ship's lights. The three newly arrived aliens stood in formation, the one in the center slightly ahead of the others. This alien suit was more ornate, with gold-colored accents and additional monitoring equipment. "Inspector Pilt," the central figure's translator boomed. "Explain your environmental breach and failure to execute cleansing protocols." "Chief Inspector Dorr," Pilt acknowledged with a formal gesture. "I have been conducting a thorough evaluation of local conditions, as per Section 118.7c, having discovered signs of intelligent habitation." "Your helmet is missing," Daughter observed coldly. "Atmosphere exposure compromises objectivity." "On the contrary," Pilt countered. "Direct exposure has provided valuable data points. Earth's atmosphere, while technically outside GEPB standards, supports abundant life forms, including advanced intelligence." Dorr's helmet turned to regard Roy, Sarah, and the children. "Primitive biological entities. Their presence does not override Class 3 environmental violations." "With respect, Chief Inspector," Pilt argued, "these beings have built complex civilizations adapted to current atmospheric conditions. Cleansing would result in planetary-scale extinction." "Regrettable but necessary," Doctor replied. "GEPB standards exist to maintain galactic environmental balance. Exceptions cannot be made for every primitive species that evolves in toxic conditions." Roy stepped forward, his patience exhausted. "Now you listen here," he said, pointing a finger at Dorr's faceplate. "We may be primitive by your standards, but we've been living on this planet just fine without your help for thousands of years." "The biological entity shows aggression," one of the other inspectors noted. "Typical of species evolving in oxygen-rich environments." "Damn right I'm showing aggression," Roy snapped. "You're threatening to wipe out my entire planet over some bureaucratic regulation." Sarah moved to stand beside Roy, Emma and Jenny half hidden behind her. "There are billions of people on Earth," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Families, children, entire civilizations. You can't just erase all that because our air doesn't meet your standards." Dorr seemed unmoved. "GEPB protocols are clear. Atmospheric composition of nitrogen-oxygen at these concentrations is classified as environmentally degrading. Cleansing will proceed as scheduled." "Chief Inspector," Pilt interjected, "I must remind you of Regulation 773B. No irreversible environmental modification may be implemented without the consent of native intelligent life forms meeting Category 2 cognitive thresholds." "These beings have not been evaluated for Category 2 classification," Dorr countered. "Then let us evaluate them now," Pilt insisted. "Their technological development, social structures, and cultural expressions clearly indicate advanced cognitive function." As the aliens argued regulations, more vehicles had begun to arrive: police cars, news vans, and curious locals drawn by the massive spacecraft. Sheriff Hollister, his uniform disheveled from breaking up the bar fight, approached cautiously. "Roy," he called, "National Guard's on their way. State police, too." "Tell them not to do anything stupid," Roy warned. "These guys could probably wipe us out without breaking a sweat." "Wait here," Sarah said suddenly, turning back toward the diner. "I have an idea." She returned moments later, carrying a small white box, a to-go container from the diner. "Inspector Pilt," she called. "Remember the apple pie from lunch? I brought an extra slice with us tonight, hoping we'd find you and Roy." She opened the box, revealing a perfect wedge of golden-crusted pie. "If you could try this without your helmet earlier, maybe Chief Inspector Dorr could try it too? See for himself that Earth has something worth preserving?" Pilt turned to Dorr. "Chief Inspector, I recommend direct sensory evaluation. The chemical compounds in this food item produce unique neurological responses that cannot be adequately conveyed through standard reports." "Absolutely not," Dorr declared. "Environmental exposure violates basic safety protocols." "I have experienced no adverse effects," Pilt pointed out. "In fact, The supposedly toxic atmosphere appears compatible with Borlaxian physiology, contrary to our models. As the standoff continued, a new vehicle arrived, a black SUV with government plates. From it emerged a tall woman in a dark suit, her manner radiating authority. "I'm Special Agent Wilson, United States Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs," she announced, approaching the group. "I've been authorized to invoke Galactic Regulation 42.8 regarding indigenous planetary sovereignty." Door's helmet swiveled toward the newcomer. "Your species is not recognized as a signatory to galactic conventions." "Perhaps not officially," Agent Wilson conceded, "but our intelligence has been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We're well aware of GEPB regulations, including those pertaining to inhabited worlds." "Impossible," one of Door's companions protested. "Earth technology is far too primitive for interstellar monitoring." "You'd be surprised what we've managed to pick up," Wilson replied with a thin smile. "Including the fact that Regulation 42.8 specifically prohibits environmental modification of any planet with indigenous sentient life without approval from the Galactic Council, which you haven't obtained." A tense silence followed, broken only by the hum of the massive spacecraft overhead. Door's suit lights blinked in patterns that suggested intense calculation, or perhaps communication with the ship above. "The situation has become unnecessarily complex," Doctor finally announced. "A full review by the Galactic Council may be warranted before proceeding with cleansing operations." "In the meantime," Pilt added quickly, "I formally request Earth be classified as protected biosphere, number 1.32 pending review. This classification would prevent any atmospheric modification for a minimum of 1 galactic cycle." "That request will be logged," Doctor conceded reluctantly. "Cleansing operations will be suspended until the Council reaches a determination." A collective sigh of relief passed through the gathered humans. Agent Wilson stepped forward to formalize the agreement, while Roy turned to Sarah and her daughters. "I think we just saved the world," he said quietly, still not quite believing it himself. "With apple pie," Sarah added with a smile. "My grandmother would be proud." "Does this mean the alien is staying?" Jenny asked hopefully. Before Roy could answer, Pilt approached them. "I have been assigned as GEPB liaison to Earth, pending the Council's review," the alien explained. "I will be commuting between your planet and Borlax Prime to compile a comprehensive report on Earth's ecosystem and civilization." "You're welcome at the cafe anytime," Roy offered. "Though maybe use the door instead of landing in the parking lot. You scared the hell out of my morning regulars." Pilt's narrow mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "Noted." As Chief Inspector Door and his companions prepared to return to their ship, Pilt made one final request. "Chief Inspector, I recommend a public declaration regarding Earth's temporary protected status. It would help prevent unnecessary alarm among the local population." Door's reluctance was obvious even through his environmental suit, but protocol demanded compliance. The senior inspector activated an amplification feature on his translator and addressed the growing crowd. "Attention, Earth inhabitants. The Galactic Environmental Protection Bureau has classified your planet as a protected biosphere pending further review. Atmospheric cleansing operations have been suspended indefinitely. Inspector Pilt will remain as liaison to facilitate information exchange." With that terse announcement, Door and his companions were engulfed in the blue energy beam and vanished, presumably transported back to their ship. Moments later, the massive vessel's engines flared to life, and it ascended into the night sky, eventually disappearing among the stars. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Sheriff Hollister was already coordinating with State Police and Agent Wilson. News reporters were broadcasting live from the scene, and children were pointing excitedly at the sky where the ship had been. "Well," Roy said to Pilt, "welcome to Earth, I guess, officially." In the weeks that followed, Mildridge, Indiana became an unlikely center of global attention. Scientists, government officials, and media representatives descended on the small town, all eager to meet the alien liaison and learn more about the galactic community Earth had suddenly joined. Roy's Cafe saw business boom as tourists flocked to the site of first contact. He'd added a galactic special to the menu, a stack of pancakes with blueberry stars and whipped cream cosmic dust. Pilt, who had developed a particular fondness for breakfast foods, was a regular customer when not engaged in official duties. Sarah's bakery thrived as well, her apple pie now famous as the dessert that saved Earth. She had even been invited to appear on national cooking shows, though she politely declined most offers, preferring to remain in Mildridge with her daughters and, increasingly, with Roy. 6 months after the initial contact, Roy, Sarah, Emma, and Jenny, along with Sheriff Hollister and a small delegation of Earth officials, were invited aboard the GEPB flagship for a formal registry ceremony. Earth would be officially listed as Protected Biosphere 1.32, with special provisions acknowledging its unique atmospheric composition and the advanced civilization it supported. The ceremony took place in an ornate chamber aboard the ship, with representatives from various galactic species in attendance. Pilt, now serving as Earth's advocate to the Galactic Council, presided over the proceedings. "It gives me great satisfaction," Pilt announced to the assembled dignitaries, "to confirm Earth's protected status. My extensive evaluation has demonstrated not only the viability of life in nitrogen-oxygen atmospheres, but the remarkable diversity and resilience of Earth species, particularly humans." The alien attendees murmured among themselves, many still skeptical about a civilization thriving in what their science classified as toxic conditions. "As is customary," Pilt continued, "we honor the individuals who facilitated this important discovery." He turned to Roy. "Roy Garrett of Mildridge Cafe, you are hereby named Tulok, Knowledge Bearer, for your role in demonstrating human adaptability and resilience." Roy accepted the honor, with an awkward nod, feeling distinctly out of place in his best suit among the exotic alien dignitaries. "Sarah Miller of Sweet Delights Bakery," Pilt continued, "you are named Zantry, Heartkeeper, for showing the cultural and emotional importance of Earth's unique biological resources." Sarah smiled, squeezing Roy's hand as she accepted the title. "Emma and Jenny Miller," Pilt addressed the girls, who were trying their best to maintain formal postures despite their excitement. "You are designated junior envoys to the galactic community, representing Earth's future generations." The ceremony concluded with the formal presentation of Earth's registry certificate, a shimmering document that seemed to be printed on some form of living crystal. Agent Wilson accepted it on behalf of Earth's governments, promising to ensure its safekeeping at the United Nations. As the Earth delegation prepared to return home, Pilt approached Roy and Sarah privately. "Your assistance has prompted a significant reevaluation of GEPB standards," the alien informed them. "Other atmospheres previously classified as toxic are being re-examined for potential habitability." "Glad we could help expand your horizons," Roy said sincerely. "My personal horizons have certainly expanded," Pilt agreed. "I have requested permanent assignment to Earth as GEPB liaison. The diversity of experiences here is educational." "You're always welcome in Mildridge," Sarah assured him. The girls would be heartbroken if their alien friend disappeared. "Though maybe give us a call before dropping by for breakfast," Roy added with a grin. "Those early morning landings still spook my regulars." Back in Mildridge, life gradually settled into a new normal. Roy's Cafe now sported a galactically approved sticker in the window, and he'd had to hire additional staff to handle the increased business. Sarah had expanded her bakery to include a small section of pastries designed for non-human visitors, based on Pilt's guidance regarding alien digestive capabilities. Most significantly, Roy and Sarah had finally acknowledged what everyone in town had known for years, that they belonged together. Their first official date had been interrupted by a minor diplomatic incident involving a Rigelian tourist misunderstanding the concept of all-you-can-eat buffet. But subsequent evenings had gone more smoothly. On a quiet Sunday morning, 6 months after Earth's official registry, Roy and Sarah sat at a corner table in Mildred's Cafe, enjoying a rare moment of peace before opening time. Emma and Jenny were setting tables nearby, arguing good-naturedly about which alien species had the coolest spaceships. Sheriff Hollister pushed through the door, tipping his hat to Sarah. "Morning, folks. Quiet night in town for once. No extraterrestrial incidents to report." "Don't jinx it, Dave," Roy warned, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter. The door chimed again, and Pilt entered, now dressed in a modified environmental suit that allowed for more interaction with humans, while still monitoring atmospheric conditions for research purposes. "Greetings," the alien said, taking a seat at the counter. "I require caffeinated stimulant and glucose-rich sustenance. Official GEPB research indicates these items optimize cognitive function for morning meetings." "In other words, coffee and a donut," Roy translated, already pouring a cup. "Coming right up." "Any news from the Galactic Council?" Sarah asked, joining them at the counter. "Positive developments," Pilt confirmed. "Earth has been recommended for upgraded status to culturally significant biosphere. This would provide additional protections and research opportunities." "Will that bring more tourists?" Roy asked warily. "Because we're already booked solid through next summer." "Inevitable, I'm afraid," Pilt admitted. "Your planet remains a curiosity. A nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, supporting advanced intelligence challenges, many established theories." Roy sighed dramatically, but couldn't hide his smile. "I guess we'll manage. We always do." Outside, the morning sun illuminated a changed Mildred. A small information center about galactic relations had opened next to the town hall. The old drive-in theater had been converted to an observation area where visitors could watch for passing spaceships. And atop the cafe, a small dish, a gift from Pilt, allowed Roy to receive notifications when official GEPB vessels were approaching, avoiding any more surprise landings during the breakfast rush. Roy walked to the door and flipped the sign from "closed" to "open," then paused to add a handwritten note beneath it. "Closed today, galactic inspection." He turned to find Sarah watching him with an amused expression. "We don't have an inspection scheduled," she pointed out. "I know," Roy grinned. "But I thought we deserved a day off. Thought maybe we could go fishing at the lake. Show Pilt how humans really enjoy their toxic atmosphere." Sarah's smile widened. "I'll pack some apple pie." As they prepared for their impromptu day off, Roy glanced at the small dish on the roof, the alien inspector enjoying coffee at his counter, and the changed town beyond his window. Life had certainly become more complicated since that autumn morning when a chandelier-shaped craft landed beside his cafe. But as he watched Sarah laugh at something Pilt had said, and saw the excitement in Emma and Jenny's faces as they planned their day at the lake, he couldn't help but think that complicated wasn't necessarily bad. After all, sometimes the universe's greatest treasures were found in the most unlikely places, even in what some might call catastrophically toxic air.